Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing Who Was Better. The topic for this Who Was Better, for the first time, we're going to do tag teams. And the two teams we've picked, the Public Enemy and the Gangstas. Two tag teams that are synonymous with ECW. When you bring up tag teams in ECW, these are two of the teams that come up right away. They feuded against each other. There's a lot of similarities. Gangstas also went on to Smoky Mountain, or they were in Smoky Mountain first. The Public Enemy had stints in WCW and WWF. But we're going to break it down. This is their time as a team, even though, let's say, like in Public Enemy, Rocco Rock was the Cheetah Kid before he was Rocco Rock. That's not going to count. This is just their time as Public Enemy. Just like the Gangstas, Mustafa was a jobber on some WCW shows before being part of the Gangstas. So with that being said, we have 8 categories. Each category is graded on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Let's see how these extreme teams go up against each other. New Jack and Mustafa versus Flyboy Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge. Gangstas versus Public Enemy. First up, technical ability. This is your suplexes, your submission holds. As it says, technical ability. For the Gangstas, I'm giving the Gangstas a 2. Although you could see, especially during their Smoky Mountain run, they were more adept than what they let on. As they fleshed out their characters and as they fleshed out what the Gangstas were, especially in ECW, it just became a barroom brawl. They had the skill to do it, I believe, especially New Jack. New Jack was a lot more skilled than people give him credit for, but he leaned on what made him the most money, which makes sense. Unfortunately, I'm giving them a 2. For the Public Enemy is getting a 3. And this is where that disclaimer in the beginning comes in, because I've seen video and I've heard a lot of people talk about Ted Petty, aka Rocco Rock, when he was a Cheetah Kid and how good of a wrestler he was. And he was really good. However, during his time in Public Enemy, much like I said with the Gangstas, they were more of a Pier 6 brawl type team. Now, while they get a little bit above the Gangstas, is because I do think they did rely a little bit more on what we consider conventional tag team wrestling. Part of that is we got to see them for a few years in WCW where they couldn't lean on just a hardcore crutch. And not saying that that's a bad thing, we just got to see a little bit more diversity. Even there, I would say their style is more akin to the Nasty Boys than I would say it would be akin to someone like the British Bulldogs. So again, the Public Enemy get a 3. For striking, this one's simple. They're both brawling teams. They're both getting 5s. This is where they stand out. Whether they're punching you in the mouth, kicking you in the face, hitting you with a guitar, hitting you with a chair, throwing you through a table, both of these teams get a solid 5 here because this is their style. This is what made them what they are. This is what the fans wanted to see them do. Again, they're top-notch in my opinion. That's why they both get a 5. Next category, how they perform as a heel. For the Gangstas are getting a 5. And one of the main reasons that they get a 5. Go back and watch some Smoky Mountain wrestling promos where Smoky Mountain has to put a disclaimer on the bottom about the views of the Gangstas do not represent Smoky Mountain wrestling. The famous one that I know, if you're watching this, you've probably already seen, where New Jack says something to the effects of, "Shout out to my homeboy O.J. Simpson. That's 2 more dead." And it's just great because they're fantastic. They play into the crowd. They play into the fact that they're in kind of the rural South in a time that's still very racist. It's still very against people with their color of skin. So yeah, they were great as heels. They played into it extremely well. They get a 5. For Public Enemy is getting a 2. And the reason why I say this, even when Public Enemy played themselves as heels, to me they often came off as more fun-loving. Like my comparison to the Nasty Boys, or even a better one might be the Sheepherders, aka the Bushwhackers. Even at their most violent, the Sheepherders had a fun aura to it. That's kind of what I got with the Public Enemy. There was always that tongue-in-cheek side, especially the way that they cut promos. The dancing, everything about that. So I don't think they worked well as heels. That's why I'm giving them a 2. Next up, how they perform as a babyface. For the Gangstas are getting a 4. While I don't think they're quite as good as faces as they are as heels, there's something natural about New Jack wanting to get hatred that just makes you gravitate towards him as a heel. I do think that they were good as faces. Now, they do suffer a bit because they weren't faces for very long anywhere. So for that reason, they can't get the top of my votes. I think if they would have stayed together as a face tag team for 2, 3, 4 years, maybe we would have considered them a 5, but the brevity of their face version of them is why they get a 4. For Public Enemy, they're getting a 4 as well. What I just said about their negatives on being a heel leans into their positives as being as faces. They were likable, they were fun, you could dance with them, you could do the na 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 na, all that stuff. It made you want to be part of it. They made you want to join in with him. You felt like you were part of the Public Enemy. So with that, they get a 4 as well. Coming up next, promos. For the Gangstas, there's really only one man that talked. Mustafa said very little, and with good reason. You have New Jack there. And for New Jack and the Gangstas, they get a 5. I mentioned it when I was talking about their heel work in Smoky Mountain, but even with their work in ECW, the Gangstas and New Jack specifically are some of the best talkers in the company. They just had an air of believability that made you believe the words that were coming out of their mouth, no matter how ridiculous they sounded, no matter how crazy what New Jack was saying was. You believed it. You believed that he believed it. And you believed that Mustafa was insane because he would look like he was insane. A lot of times just standing there or making just weird noises. So for that, they get a 5. Now going to Public Enemy. Public Enemy's getting a 3. The difference between the Public Enemy's promos and the Gangstas promos in what I would say is a very similar gimmick is Public Enemy always kind of came off as 2 wrestlers playing street guys, whereas the Gangstas came off as street guys that became wrestlers, if that makes sense to you. I always kind of felt like Public Enemy were playing a role, and not that they didn't play it great, it just never felt as serious. And even though they were probably more successful as far as championship wise and all of that, to me personally, I always thought that they were a little bit on the performative side, if that makes sense. So for that, again, they get a 3. Now going into presentation, starting with the Gangstas. The Gangstas are going to get a 4. From the camo pants or the military pants and the black shirts, sometimes with rap groups of the time, whether it be Tupac or Public Enemy, which is funny because Public Enemy's on the other side of this. They looked the part, and especially when you pair them with the Natural Born Killers song, that really added so much to their presentation. Kind of like Sandman and Enter Sandman. You can't think of them, and especially New Jack, without thinking of that song. Even though if you watch it on Peacock or the WWE Network, well, WWE Network's dead. I guess Netflix, for those of you that are outside of America, it's dubbed over with some crappy stuff. But anyway, I digress. Their presentation fit them. The best comparison I could give that to someone today would be someone like Eddie Kingston. Eddie Kingston feels like he walked off the street of Yonkers into a wrestling ring. Just kind of like the Gangstas felt like they walked off the streets into a wrestling ring. So for me, their presentation was a 4. Now going over to Public Enemy, they're also going to get a 4. The reason why the Public Enemy is so high is I love the style that they brought. The hockey jerseys, the colorful hockey jerseys that matched the basketball shorts they would wear, or if you're old enough to remember, there were times they had like the starter outfits where it would be like a team shirt and team shorts that matched each other. Even though they were more colorful, and like I said, I hate keep going back to this because it sounds like I'm saying bad things about them. I'm really not. The Public Enemy are fantastic. It felt like the TV version of what a street gang would be, or street wrestlers would be, but they pulled it off. And putting that in with the Here Comes the High Step and the dance that they did, I know it's like the second time I'm doing it here, it was infectious. That's why you see one of the famous shots of everybody in the ring with them dancing in the ring collapsing. It's because the fans just loved it. They gravitated to it. So again, they get a 4 as well. Now going on to charisma, for both teams, I'm giving both of them a 4. Now, I could have easily went with a 5 for just New Jack. Out of the 4 men, New Jack is the most charismatic of all 4 of them, no doubt about it. However, we're talking about tag teams. And I'm not trying to knock Mustafa. Mustafa was a great tag team partner for New Jack. Mustafa's one of those guys who's kind of like a Jim Neidhart. He works best when he's somebody else's part, where he's a heavy for somebody else. So therefore, he kind of brings the team down a bit. No knock on Mustafa, just saying. And both these teams had insane charisma. The fans, especially in ECW, loved both of these teams. I mean, they were both top notch. I'd give them both a 4. I don't think they ever reached that like upper tier like Sabu would have had in ECW, or Rob Van Dam, or Taz, or even like the Sandman or Tommy Dreamer. But they're just right there under it, that second level, where I think you would have them, people like Rhino, people like Chris Candido, that are on just that second level, not quite up at the top, but right there, still very good. Our final category, big game performance. When you put them in a big match, whether it's ahead of a show, highlighting a pay-per-view, how do they perform? For the Gangstas, I'm giving them a 3. The Gangstas did not have as many opportunities as Public Enemy, and their style, while enjoyable and fun to watch, it always felt like an early card, middle of the card at best. And yes, I know there are some times that they were in the main event, but it always felt like something that you would get to warm up the fans, not something you would see as the main event. So for that, they get a 3. Public Enemy, they're getting a 4. I put them a little bit higher, and a lot of that has to do with that WCW run. Now, they weren't portrayed as great in WCW as they were in ECW. In ECW, they were portrayed as a top team. But even with the little bit that they got in WCW, they were able to parlay that into some success. So for me, I think that they were in more high-profile matches than the Gangstas were as a team, and they did more in those matches than the Gangstas did in their high-profile matches, so that's why they get a 4. Now, going from that, we have our total. For the Gangstas, 32. For Public Enemy, 29. But wait, there is more. Forgot to mention in the beginning, sorry if this is your first video, but we do a bonus points here. Basically, this is your opportunity to have your opinion added into this. And every Wednesday, I put on the community page on my YouTube a simple vote, in this case the 2 tag teams, and you have the opportunity to pick which one you think is better, and whoever wins the poll, that team gets a bonus 5 points. It could be the difference between a win and a loss. As you see here, these teams are only separated by 3. So with that being said, the winner of the poll and getting the bonus 5, the Gangstas, giving them a total of 37 to Public Enemy's 29. And this was close. It wasn't a blowout, and I know the 5 bonus points make it seem like it may have been. I do kind of think when we look back at these 2 teams, we tend to look more fondly back at the Gangstas because of New Jack, and we don't look as fondly on Public Enemy. A lot of the reason is Public Enemy was in ECW before ECW really reached their zenith, before it was really popular. And then also you got the run in WWF, which was a disaster. And their kind of lackluster run in WCW as well. So while I think the Gangstas get more love historically, I do think the Public Enemy were a great comparison for them for this type of video. I think these teams are very well matched, especially for something like this. But, as you can see, the Gangstas are the winner. Now for this, we do have a new friend here, and this is a Force Inteller Darth Vader, and it's basically like a Darth Vader Magic 8 Ball, so we're going to ask his opinion. I got this I don't know if you've ever ordered off of Walmart, but they do this silly thing where if it's under $35, you have to pay for shipping, but if it's over $35, you get free shipping. So this little guy here was $6. So he was the difference between me paying $8 for shipping or paying $6, coming out cheaper, and getting this, basically. So we're going to ask him. All right, so how we're going to do this, we're going to ask Darth Vader if he agrees with the final decision. Darth Vader, do you agree that the Gangstas are better than Public Enemy?
What is thy bidding, my master?
I forgot you have to wake him up, so let's ask him again. Vader, are the Gangstas better than Public Enemy?
Awaiting orders. Be careful not to choke on your aspirations.
I appreciate that, Vader, but I know it's silly. I just wanted to add some silliness here on the end. But anyway, that's my opinion. Thank you for watching here to the end. Make sure you smash the like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And once again, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Who Was Better.